Is Dr. Frank Kaufmann. Dr. Kaufmann is the president of the Settlement Project, and he has worked in the area of religion and peace for over 40 years, including the Gulf War negotiations, the Israeli-Palestine conflict, and elsewhere, earning him the Visionary of Peace Award by the Interfaith Roundtable of Ireland. He is the editor-in-chief of New World Encyclopedia, and his most recent book is Woke Ideology, Critique, and Counterproposal, which you have a QR code there if you'd like to order that at your discretion. Please do. Please order a box of them and share them with your friends. So let's welcome up Dr. Kaufmann. He's going to talk to us about the counterproposal today, and this will be very, very informative. So, Dr. Kaufmann.
Thanks very much, Marquis. Grateful for your introduction. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm very grateful. I came under kind of divine demand. I think a lot of people in the room know what that's like. It was at the beginning of 2020 when it looked like a little bit of gains against the type of horrors that we've heard about all day was about to slip from our hands, and indeed it was. The so-called COVID pandemic was an occasion for the thoroughgoing corruption of the possibility of fair elections, and there did not seem to be sufficient attention to that. That put me in a kind of an emotional or psychic tailspin, which resulted in me founding the Settlement Project at that time for the sake of protecting America, or not letting it slide out of our hands. I thought the 2016 election brought the possibility of genuine reform in America after a period of political leadership on both sides of the aisle that could have served America far better than it did. As I sat here this afternoon, I actually shed a tear and thanked God for the inspiration to found the Settlement Project, if for no other reason than just that this meeting could have happened today. I felt happy that God allowed over the years to have occasions like this. We just did something very similar in Los Angeles, and you are hearing directly from the people who know factually exactly what is threatening our future. And so I felt pleased and grateful for the blessing of God on this project and on this work. Okay, so I'm grateful for the panel. I learned a tremendous amount. And when I'm in the same thing happened to me in LA. When I'm in the presence of panels like this, I feel small. I'm a visitor to another war front. It's like going. You know, everybody likes to go visit the troops. That's a part of American culture, American life. President Trump just brought Prime Minister Takaichi onto the USS. What was the name of the boat? The Pacific Force, the Navy, the U.S. George Washington. You saw she was just as excited as can be. When America is looking good and being right, there's nothing more exciting and more delightful than that. But being among the warriors, those who fight to defend our freedom, is a place where everybody wants to be. The older among us would remember that the beautiful starlets would go to visit the troops in war zones, and Bob Hope, and it's a tradition. And what's happening to me now as a result of coming to events like this, I feel like I'm visiting the troops. It's these ladies that we heard from today are the true warriors on the front line, and they're facing hostile incoming fire. Their lives have been overturned. I remember Darby showing up and cops had come and took stuff out of her house. Her husband was away at the time, wasn't it? He was I think they took away your firearms and things, wasn't it?
No, I did go to court though, and I had the threat of going to jail because they were accusing me of stalking order when all I did was call out the other board member on their failures as a board member, and that violates my First Amendment right to speech. But they had a crooked judge granted this stalking order against me. So I had the threat of going to jail for 6 months and getting my kids taken away from me while my husband was in Iraq.
There you have it. There you have it. So what I'm saying is that you're not hearing book learning when we're hearing the speeches like we heard today. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And the other thing is that this is only one particular dimension of the assault on our country, on our society, and on our civilization. There's the gender agenda, independent of what's going on in schools. Of course, the young people are the most vulnerable and are the target of the gender ideological work, but it's not limited to just the schools. There's the racialist agenda that seeks to divide Americans from one another in ever smaller increments and ever smaller sub-demographics. There's the no borders agenda. The no borders agenda is not merely just a cynical pursuit of redrafting the American voting demographics, which it is, but it's also an expression of an ideological commitment that borders are the manifestation of oppression. It's ideological underneath. So we see the corrupt intention of those people working against our country, but they themselves do not believe themselves to be evil. They think they're doing something good. And the point of my little presentation today is to, and then in addition to that, there's no police, no security agenda. All of these things all derive out of a single ideological wellspring, a single ideological force. And so the reason why I put this particular presentation together is in order for all the warriors to have a slightly more nuanced or slightly more clear grasp of who you are looking at, who you are dealing with, who is opposing you, and where they get their inspiration, their energy, their solidarity. It comes from the tragic disruption or perversion of their capacity to see right from wrong, and their passionate conviction that they are acting for the sake of human welfare. And that's where the greater danger lies. And I'll touch upon these matters in this presentation. I think our speakers have made it clear that we are in a war. Marquis at the outset in his introductory remarks called this a war. For me, this is not metaphorical. It is a war. It happens to be a war against our children, against our future, our country, our civilization. In this presentation, I'm going to cover 5 things. They're brief. What is war? Types of evil. War at the level of ideology and culture. The modern history of misplaced hatred of God. Underlying, as I forget which, maybe it was Hillary, underlying these ideological designs, which are complex and deeply established, in essence is a rage against God. Once it's all boiled down and understood. Finally, the final part of this presentation is what are the elements to establish good? What steps can we take to combat this and present what indeed we all aspire to or dream of, or the ideals we hold? Why do I call this a war? Why has every speaker identified this as a war? War is this: if there are enemies who seek to ravage a non-negotiable in our lives, war is the result. When we must defend something at the cost of our lives, we have been brought into a condition of war. So the radical positions of pacifism, they don't hold under most people who are committed to a rigorous pattern of thought. In this case, the non-negotiable that we will defend at the cost of our lives are our children, are the innocence of our children, are the right of our children to have minimal education in order to at least survive in this world, if not prosper, at least not celebrate the fullness of their creativity. When that is under threat, this is no longer a hobby, this is no longer quote unquote political activism, it is war. We are defending something sacred. If something is described as an enemy, that means something that has a full destructive intent over something that is precious, sacred, and non-negotiable in our lives. There are two types of enemies. One are enemies without, enemies outside of our system, and enemies within. The enemies without are the Chinese Communist Party, militant jihadist extremism, and those are state-embodied groups or states that have the destruction of the United States of America as a core intention of their economy, their military, their politics, their narratives, their ideology, their education. They desire or intend the undermining or destruction of the United States of America. In order to meet state actors, what the tools of standing up in war are military strength and international diplomacy. These are the two tools that are needed to deal with state actors and foreign agents that seek the destruction of something that is sacred and precious to you and our own country. The enemies within, people are familiar with the phrase the long march through the institutions. It's been identified by our speakers already today. This is the ideological institutional capture by Marxists and wokeists. I make a distinction which will become clear as in a short while. So these groups have captured primarily, they've captured the churches. People believe that or not? They've captured churches. They've captured the media. They've captured the political system. They've captured sports. Do people believe that or not? There is no institution in America that was not the deliberate design for Marxists and woke ideological activists to take over in order to systematically cripple and ultimately bring about the downfall of the United States of America. And ultimately, not particularly America, it's just America most stands in the way. It's the strongest, deepest place where freedom is the core root. Individual sovereignty, God-given rights. Since it's here, and because we're rich and powerful, it must be the front line of all attacks against free human individuals. But here's where it must be won first. Whereas military strength and diplomacy are necessary to combat enemies from without, the tools for combating enemies from within are security, the arenas, I should say, are security, politics, law, and culture. These are the arenas in which we need to face those who mean to undermine our welfare and our civilization. Our war is attack on our children, attack on our families, attack on our culture, and attack on our homeland. That's why we're gathered here today. The second part of, I mentioned I'm going to go through 5 things. The second, so the first one was what is war. The second part is what is evil. Here's an important thing that I'd like us to catch or pay attention, especially those warriors who are on the front line. There are 2 types of evils. There is corruption and criminality. That results in evil behavior. Corruption and criminality. Power seeking and violent aggression against citizens for private and personal wealth. The other types of evils are delusion and ideological capture. These are 2 separate and different things. Corruption and criminality is power as a violation of morals and ethics. People who are involved in this know that they are involved in evil actions. The thing about them is that they do not have the capacity to do that much harm. They can kill you, they can shoot up a school. This form of evil, they can mug you, they can have a criminal section of town. You lose tens of lives, you lose hundreds of lives. Once a person is under the grips of an ideological force in which they believe they're doing right, that degree of evil is boundless in its potential to cause human destruction and loss of life. So, the Enlightenment philosophers, the Enlightenment philosophers of the French Revolution, they believed with all of their heart they were doing good for human beings. That resulted in the French Revolution, it resulted in the Reign of Terror, it resulted in the grotesque and brutal unfolding of, in short measure, tens of thousands of human lives. Tens of thousands of human lives in grotesque and brutal ways. Marxism was the next group of people who thought they were doing good. What is it? The proletariat, the utopia of the proletariat. You know, the wonderful world they're building. Close to 100 million deaths, or maybe 100 million deaths, simply by being wrong about what you believe is the nature of the good you're trying to pursue. Should some boss work an individual to death? No. Should some boss work a guy so badly and just steal everything he's got and leave him in subsistence life? No. These are things we all hold, we wouldn't want to see. It's wrongs we want to correct. But if your ideological designs for correcting who was speaking about SEL, emotional, if you're emotionally moved by the inequalities you meet and what you seek to apply is dead wrong, you end up with millions dead. So this is the second part of what I wanted to point out, especially for all of us who are involved in this battle, in this war, that it's a habit to think of who is opposing us as evil by nature, as criminal, as illegitimate, but they themselves don't think of themselves that way. And if we don't know our enemy, we're not going to be as effective as we hope to be. So the imagery here are, these were 2 guys who murdered an old lady, and while in court, they just found it the most entertaining thing. Here they are laughing. That's the type of, nobody is fooled by that. But here's, I forget his first name, Harari, out of the World Economic Forum. What's his first name? Harari. Susan, you know? Okay. Anyway, he's a techno-humanist. He already has a design for the removal of several billion human beings. Because human beings are bad for the planet. You know that, right? Several billion. So that's a guy, he's not a bad guy. People admire the heck out of this guy. But this is, so I'm just, this was my purpose, was to show the two different types of evil. We need to understand that when we're in this battle, we need to understand who our enemies are, and to just paint them as evil, like the open border people. Yes, they are trying to hold power forever for for the Democrat Party, but they are the fruits of decolonial academic education, decolonial. And so a border is a sample or an example of oppression. Any American who wants to keep someone out of the country is an oppressor, is a racist. And so the habit to understand our opponents as simple criminal, power-hungry individuals will miss the mark, and they will persist in their agenda, winning the hearts and minds of vulnerable young people. So once you get to the ideological level, no matter how complex, no matter how difficult, no matter how rarefied, and especially if you're going to study postmodern critical theory or critical theory, the level of philosophical nuance and subtlety is impossible to navigate. But it all boils down to this one fundamental starting point. Is there a creator? Does all of reality reflect the deliberate intention of an entity with a design and purpose who is benevolent? That's the view of people of faith. It's just faith. You can't prove it. People try, but you can't. Because anything that you would point to prove the existence of a creator, the person who's sure there's none will twist that to prove the exact opposite. So if there is a creator, that means an entity with intent and purpose and benevolence with that purpose. It automatically unfolds, no matter how complex the philosophy you're going to create. It will unfold with the necessity to affirm that reality has purpose, that it has a particular order. So the relativism of the woke ideology, in which everything is the word slips my mind. Contextual. Everything is contextual, which the educators are familiar with. It. You can't sit on any truth. That's how you get the effort to separate gender from sex. Is that there's nothing you can affirm as true. But if there's a creator, things have to be true. Anybody who tries to create something, there has to be some order of things. And so, what is the purpose of the creator? At the American founding, the founding documents, it is the freedom of the individual, the right to the equality of all people, the right to pursue happiness. That's the purpose. Once there's a creator, life has meaning. There's meaning. And what is the meaning? The meaning is compassion. Once a creator is affirmed at the basis of whatever philosophical system you're going to build, basically it results in the faithful seek, and this is in the founding documents as well, a more perfect union. That's people who are free and people of faith love unity. They love unity. This is the meaning of fellowship. The outcome of a life of faith is compassion and harmony. When there's no creator, and I'll go through the various systems that have attempted to put that forward as a foundation for philosophical systems, you have to replace the creator with something else that seeks to do the good. The Enlightenment people replaced the creator with human reason. It didn't sound that nasty, that bad. But you remove the creator, and then you're going to say, oh, human reason will provide will provide a better idea. You're not going to have these corrupt clergy exploiting little children and things like that. We'll all just think this through. Basically, you put human beings above God, and once we all agree that this is the best way to proceed, then I need absolute power to make sure that that's how this is going to be put into place. Matter, the Marxists put matter above God. The woke people put system above God. They have to have something at the basis to create, to account for what life, what reality is all about. The Enlightenment philosophers had reason instead of God. The communists have matter instead of God. The woke ideology people have system instead of God. And so that's where you get systemic, everything's systemic racism. So you say, I'm not racist. They say, just that you're in the system. The system produces marginalization. It's its own force. So basically you're replacing a benevolent, purposeful creator who creates human beings with an explicit purpose. You're replacing it with something that creates conflict and marginalization by nature. These are the two possible foundations. And so for people who are in the fight, it's better, I should say, that they also are rigorous in their personal spiritual pursuits. It's better because the only way we're going to be able to represent the ideal of respect, of harmony, it has to trace to why that's the case. And if it's the purpose of the Creator, that's the best we can prefer. Okay. So there's three occasions in which human beings tried to replace God. There was the French Enlightenment era, in which they used reason to I touched on it already just now. There's the Marxist era with dialectical and historical materialism, and the woke era, the era of postmodern critical theory. It's basically a narrative of domination. The narrative of domination is the foundation by which all philosophies and ideologies arise that undermine human identity. The moment you say, I am, if you say, the genius of the woke ideologues and why they're stronger than the Marxists intellectually is because they spot the possibility of God earlier on. Marxists were just atheists. They're against God. But the woke philosophers, postmodern critical philosophers, the moment you say, I am, it means that there is something that pre-exists. If you say, I am a man, somewhere down the line you're going to get to God. What is maleness? Where did it come from? So there can't ever be a fundamental affirmation of anything. It anticipates a creator. And so the radical undermining of any affirmation of truth is a necessary part of the final step toward the destruction of the United States of America and for the ideal of human freedom. With the French Enlightenment, it resulted in the French Revolution and the brutal murder or genocide of the ruling class was because they represented the oppressive force of the religious system, of the ancien regime, of Christendom. There's always needs to be a resistance against anything that affirms the possibility of God, because the deniers of God believe that leads to oppression and marginalization. The Marxists, their resistance took the place of the Bolshevik Revolution and later Marxist revolutions, and that just resulted in global genocide. The woke people require the annihilation of meaning in language, the annihilation of identity, including gender, and the annihilation of racial harmony, borders, and these elements of life as a whole. They anticipate, they refuse any statement as possibly true, because they can recognize that eventually you must affirm a norm, a system, something that is created or purposeful. Every time there was this movement from the left to deny God, the religious side reformed itself, improved itself, and tried to answer the challenges of the left. So after the failure of Christendom and the rise of the French Enlightenment and the rise of the revolutionaries came the Reformation and Counter-Reformation. Christianity tried to respond to the critique of the Enlightenment rationalists, because the clerics had become corrupt in medieval Christianity. The Reformation tries to fix that. It brings God closer to human beings. The Bible was put in what's the word again? There's one word for common human language.
Vernacular.
The Bible becomes in the vernacular. We can read the Bible ourselves. There's no clergy between us and God, and so forth. This is a Reformation. So when the spiritual side tries to purify itself in response to the critique of the left, you have a new version, a new Christianity, a new and an improved relationship of God and human beings. And the result is that the Christian side and the right side and the God side prospers enormously because of human beings are closer to God. With that prosperity came the corruption of the industrial elite. And then Marx comes and says, this is what Christianity produces. It produces robber barons, it produces the Vanderbilts, it produces people who enslave workers. Marxism comes and says, Christianity gave you nothing. It just created a bunch of greedy industrialists. And what, in response to the critique of the Marxists, come the Christian social era of development, similar to the Reformation. This time you'll have, I'll cover that in a second. It's here. I jumped ahead of myself in the summary. Okay, so Christendom becomes corrupt. The Enlightenment era philosophers react. They produce rationalism and humanism, the supremacy of reason, replacing the authority of God. Once that's the philosophy, it becomes ideology, and once ideology happens, the destruction of human life happens. It always ends the same way. There's a Christian response to the challenge of the Enlightenment philosophers, more direct God-human relations, the Gutenberg Bible, Bible in the vernacular, advances in human knowledge, prosperity, modernity through renewed spirituality, humility, and blessing. Then comes the corruption of the Christian social sphere, the wealth produced from the improvement of religious life. They don't use the wealth for the sake of the people. Marx appears with a challenge to the corruption of religious life. What happens in response? Same problem. Marx is just a philosopher. He can think all he wants. He can have all the bad ideas he wants. Fine with me. Anybody can have any bad idea. As soon as it becomes ideology is when it translates into human destruction and human genocide. So this is another point I'd like to call to our attention, is the relationship between philosophy and ideology. It starts out with this beautiful idea, workers' paradise. It ends up with 100 million dead in genocide. In response to Marxism Christian renewal, the era of social equality. It's the era of the end of slavery, the end of colonies, women's rights, racial equality. It's a response to the critique. It's bringing the religious ideals back forward. And once again, Soviet communism, the force of Marxism was defeated. I call it Reagan. It wasn't Reagan. In a way, it's Christian America, symbolizing the Christian side won. Soviet communism fell. This was Reagan, Thatcher, Pope John Paul II, and so on and so forth. This was the evidence that once you have the where is it? Once you have the improvement of spiritual life, the blessing comes again, and the spiritual side is strengthened again. In my view, that was an opportunity for the religious side and the Christian side to finally inherit the world and bring forward biblical standards, or Quranic standards, or Vedic standards. I don't care whose religion you are. Once the spiritual side has gained ascendancy, it's an opportunity to bring forward the standards of moral and compassionate life. There should not be greed, there should not be sexual corruption, there should not be immorality, and so forth. And the period from the victory over communism was not carried forward by the courage in the Christian community to stand for sexual morality, to stand for family. I think one of the greatest things about Charlie Kirk and his couple was the shift from simply believe in Jesus and be saved to get married and have children. This was the greatest moment for contemporary Christendom. Be a man, be a lady, keep yourself pure, meet your couple, because prior to that, there was no, even the clergy would presume that, oh, I've got a daughter who's a lesbian, or my kids are sexually active. No one ever dreamt that their kids wouldn't be sexually active. There was no force of the spiritual blessedness that came from the victory over materialism and Marxism. And so during that time, woke ideology could creep in and come to threaten us even worse than Soviet Marxism, because it's more sophisticated. Here's a slide I wrote. Communism was defeated only economically and militarily, not ideologically. Because the problem of communism is not that it has a socialist economy. The problem of communism is that it's atheist. I already showed you that pair of slides. If you remove God, this happens. And none of our victory, of the American and Western victory over the Soviet challenged this atheism. It only said that socialism, it was a whole free market movement. It only said that socialism is bad. It didn't say that atheism is bad. President Trump comes in now, and he's kind of the Reagan to wokeism. He's the Reagan to wokeism. As Reagan was to Marxism, President Trump is the Reagan to wokeism. But we are in danger of the exact same problem. And this is why we exist. This is why I talk. This is what this lecture is about. If we do not meet the ideological root of what we're defeating, yes, he did. Yes, thank God he defunded USAID. Thank God he defunded the NEA, what's it? The government, the Department of Education. Yeah, he's doing all the right things. He's pulling the plugs, pulling the money, et cetera, et cetera. But that's political work. That's political work. But the main thing that must be established is a rooted philosophy in the affirmation of God the Creator, as our nation's founders clearly knew and expressed. They said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we are created, not we exist. That's a UN declaration, that we exist. The American Declaration, we were created with inalienable rights, free and equal. So the existence of the Settlement Project and the reason why I take a few moments here to try to present this is to get at the philosophical and ideological root of wokeism. While President Trump does this great work, now is an ideal time. But it's not an ideal time to repeat the same mistake as we rejoiced when communism was conquered. And now we're under worse attack than ever. Okay, so very quickly, the philosophy, and this is difficult, but if we can get it, it's valuable. The philosophy that underlies wokeism is called postmodern critical theory. It mostly comes out of France. It's Marxism that has traveled through French language philosophers. Their names are, you may have probably heard of, Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida. They each have a side of undermining the possibility of order in life. Race, gender, and sexuality are socially constructed. They are only available in individuals' lived experience. That's where the E, the S-E-L, or all of it, social, what is it?
Social emotional.
Social emotional. The social is a socially constructed. I have no self except what the system made of me. And emotional. It's only, the original one was out of feminism. No womb, no opinion. That's standpoint theory. No womb, no opinion. So I'm not allowed to have an opinion on abortion because I'll never have to give birth. That's called standpoint theory. And that's what traps all claims to anything being true as embedded in the individual. There's no universal conversational truth. That's why the answer is always forbidding to speak. Censorship, that's censorship culture. Standpoint theory is censorship culture. That's why she called, Darby, I think, debate is violence, right?
Yes.
Debate is violence. This is because all categories are socially constructed and only in lived experiences. Only in the individual subjective mind can you say anything is true. And if you are to even think to the contrary of what I insist is the case, this is violence. This is violence. And some people point to the assassination attempt on President Trump and the actual assassination of Charlie Kirk as the twist of all this language of hate crimes, hate speech as violence, and therefore justify the removal of the speaker. That's what the translation is from postmodern critical theory to the ideology of wokeism. Identities are not fixed essences. They are socially constructed by power knowledge, that's Foucault, in discourse and narratives designed to dominate, humiliate, and marginalize. So, this is why to say that there's a woman is a threat to this movement. To say that there is a male, to say that that let alone there's an ideal standard of sexual relations. Oh my God. You'll never get there under this basic philosophical direction. Once the philosophy, postmodern critical theory, that there are, in this system, the greatest thing you could be accused of is essentialism. You're an essentialist. That's like saying it's the same as being a racist. So if you say that there's such a thing as a woman, or you're a biological essentialist, you couldn't be more insulted in the academy, where your kids are going to school, and while they come home and you're accursed while you're eating your turkey because you've accidentally said, "Oh, I like to watch the WNBA, girls basketball," and your child storms out because it's the philosophical anticipation of any affirmation of anything that is essentialist. Because as soon as you have something that exists independently of social construction, sooner or later God has to enter into the picture. It's chess at far levels. So as it becomes an ideology, it destroys gender of necessity. It destroys racial relations of necessity. It destroys common sense sovereignty of a nation of necessity. And the only response, the only thing available to somebody committed to these mental frames is resistance. It's the only, you can't build anything. All you can do is resist. Because the system always produces oppression, always produces the marginalized. So life is resistance. That's what, things that boggle your mind. Throwing tomato soup on the Mona Lisa. Things that you can't imagine you would ever have seen in your life. It's because all that exists is resistance. The system is, instead of a beneficent God, you have a system that produces oppression and marginalization. That is the essential force behind all elements of the woke culture. So here's the counterproposal, and then I'll be through. I may have gone a bit long, I hope not. Okay, just as we saw the reformation of religious life or Christian life in each of the times that the left has tried to replace God, I would like to posit for consideration that you can't argue any further. You say there's a creator, and then they say, no, there isn't. That's the whole argument. You can't get beneath that argument. It's axiomatic. Humans are given identity by their creator. No, they aren't. It starts there. You can't, and then the ideological conflict begins. Here's the claim of the believer. There is a creator. For those who deny it, they'll say, if that's the case, why do people who claim that there's a creator treat each other so badly? Especially the closer and closer you get, the worse and worse they treat one another. How can there possibly be a creator if these are the very people that behave like that towards a Muslim, a Hindu, a Zoroastrian? On the side of there is a creator. Creators are being sovereign, ruled by God, and free to pursue happiness. For the one who will argue against it, how can you imagine that a person entirely sovereign, entirely free, and entirely free to pursue their own happiness, how can you possibly imagine that this won't create marginalization, inequality, oppression? That's the side of no creator. Here's the side of creator. So what I'd like to recommend as a possible way for our final elevation of Christendom is to meet these two challenges the same way Christendom met the Enlightenment challenge, the Marxist challenge, with each of their responses. Here's the first thing that I think faces especially Christians, and maybe every religion, probably every religion, is that if that's a fundamental critique of believers, if you say there's a creator, why do you treat one another, other believers, so badly? Then that means that we need to commit ourselves and find a way, without watering down our faith. If I believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father but by me, I need to never let even
an iota move from that, and I need to love and respect every Muslim, every true believing Muslim. I have to find a way to be never waver or touch. Just like the Muslim, they're going to think the same thing about the Christians. So I'm not talking about a softening of faith and commitment. I'm talking about the capacity for people of faith and people of religion to find a way to demonstrate an alliance and a brotherhood and sisterhood that stands to face the real enemy, not one another. Is that clear? It's a big call. It's a big call. I get a lot of resistance from that. But in longer lectures, I point out that America was founded by Christians who had spent 30 years killing each other to absolute death. The 30 Years' War. The only reason why it stopped was there was no one left to kill. There was no one left to kill. They exhausted themselves. And those very same people came to America and founded the United States of America. Those very same people. So we did it once, just on the level of Christendom. Now, in those intervening years, since the American Revolution till now, America is filled up with every religion of every sort. We have to find a way to do that one more time. We have to find a way to make America one nation under God, which we claim to be. Okay, that's one thing. So I love this slide, you know. Here's Bubba from the First Baptist Church trying to point to these tiny little letters that not even a Baptist can read about the rugged cross. And there's, what's her name, whoever, you know, I can't think of a Muslim name, you know, saying, the hell, you know, like, what, you know, it's, no, it jumps the line, you know, it's there, you know, it's like, yeah. So I love this, you know, that to me is brotherly love, sisterly love. We got to get there somehow and break through our parochial barriers. The second thing is that because America was founded and individual sovereignty was declared, and it's correct, in an era where family was presumed and church was presumed. So there was a safe place for the radical individualism proclaimed by the founders. Now, family has declined and religious institutions have declined. I would like to recommend that where we can begin to stick to our affirmation of radical, sovereign, individual freedom in a way that won't create bad people is reaffirm the family. Reaffirm the family. The same way Charlie Kirk was doing, and hopefully Erica will continue to do and will continue to do. In the family, there is a structure that holds everything in place, that allows individuals to be situated in places where my radical individualism does not cause, it's held in check. Back when the American founders declared radical sovereign individualism, families were there, churches were there. The misinterpretation of freedom to just do anything I want and act in any way I want and steal anything I want and dress in any way I want, it was all held in check at the time. That needs to be brought back. And I believe that the religious community needs to turn to an overt bolstering of family life. And we've heard that all morning long, all day long from our sisters who've been speaking, that even like the whole movement to homeschooling. It's the family, the whole movement to parental rights. It's the family to bring the force of religious life. Because I don't know if I'm going to get agreement on this, but for the longest time, Christianity was my salvation, save my soul, my relationship with Jesus. Yes, it's true, it's all true. But under the circumstances where the structures for free individuals were removed, we have to bring our voice as religious people of faith, back to say the family is the place where that freedom is cultivated, is educated, and is held in check, so that I'm not doing damn stupid things. And so the two things that I wanted talk, and I conclude here, the two things I wanted to talk about, when I say safe, so I don't mean safe space. I mean safe that he's not going to be so greedy as to, or not be so free as to think I'm just sleeping with anybody else. Safe meaning safe to the rest of everybody else. That's what I mean by that. Not the typical left abuse of the term safe. So you have the family as it exists. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get it back up in a second. You have the family as it exists. This is almost ontological. It's almost, and then you have the family as it unfolds. You have history. And so you have parents, children, husband and wife, elder, younger. Those are always there. They're holding me in check. And you have family growing throughout history. You have grandparents, parents, children. And so when I talk about a counterproposal to wokeism and removing woke indoctrination for our schools, I hope and pray that the people of faith and the patriots, and those, like those who we have here, are people who consider the possibility that Christendom and my faith must be more capable of greater interreligious relations. Not more diluted, more watery, no. Better interreligious relations. And more family-oriented and less privately oriented for the declaration of our faith. So I think I may have gone a little long. I apologize for that, but I'm very grateful for your attention. I hope some of it was helpful.